It's been said that music is the universal language, one that can tell stories and challenge norms. And for just that reason, for many people, it matters whether a band is Canadian. Joining us now for a look at how well Canada's indie rock scene reflects and expresses Canada today, Shehzaad Jiwani. He is the frontman of Grays, one of Toronto's noisiest punk bands, and their latest album is called Outer Heaven. Welcome.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
I always have, it's so weird when you put music in like a genre and call it this and call it that.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit difficult for the artist to be put in a box that way, because I think that when you're making music, you don't really think of it as one thing. And it's more of a journalistic thing to sort of classify you a certain way.
Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from their job as writers and journalists to kind of communicate what exactly this thing is to people who might not have the language to dissect it that way, which is fine, but it gets kind of out of hand when someone tells you what you are, and it's like, well, I don't identify that way musically, so it can be kind of annoying. But
yeah, I always feel weird saying a band is X, because it's like, well, what if you don't think you're X?
Yeah, totally.
Right? I want to set the table for our discussion by playing a clip from your first single,
Sure.
No Star, from your latest album, Outer Heaven.
Don't shoot, I'm not the enemy. They want you to be scared of me. I'm everybody's strategy. Where do I turn with no star in the sky?
You know, I get a sense of sadness hearing that song. What inspired you to write the song?
The song was written after the attacks in Paris at the Bataclan Club. We were on tour in November of last year, and we heard the news as we were arriving to this club in Minneapolis that we were playing, and it was terrifying. You know, it was very, very jarring to hear that people, some people that we were friends of ours, were at this club being attacked, and it was just immediately, we were silent and very, very afraid. I remember calling my mom, just asking her what is happening? Why is this happening? And then beyond that, sort of people's responses to that, both, you had people burning down mosques in Ontario, and people being attacked on the subway in Toronto just for looking a certain way. And then on the other side of things, you also had people sort of using that as a platform to sort of further their own agendas, and really the people who it affected the most were the least vocal about it. Or not the least vocal, but given the, not so much of a voice, I felt, and weren't part of the equation. And I thought that that was sort of unfair. And being a person of color, it felt very uncomfortable to me, and I didn't like being spoken for that way, and I'm sure many other people feel that way as well. So the song was sort of an aggravated response to that, of just being tired of somebody else speaking for me on either side of the equation. So that's where it came from.
Did you find people treated you differently after that?
Not me personally. I can only speak from my own personal experiences. And I've been pretty fortunate growing up in Toronto, where it's very ethnically diverse. The music community is extremely inclusive. So I don't think that people treated me differently, but it certainly became a topic of conversation, which admittedly, when you choose a single that is about something as serious as that, people are going to want to talk to you about it, which I fully take on board. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of the message was kind of missed.
What was missed?
I think it was missed in terms of people wanted to talk about it because it was a talking point, not because they were genuinely curious about it. It seemed like a lot of publications, certain publications, I guess, kind of, it's like a platform that they want to talk about because maybe it generates more traffic or something like that. So it seemed sort of ironic in a way, but also it's something that needs to be talked about. So I think ultimately, if people are giving me and by extension a group of marginalized people a voice, then that's ultimately a good thing, I think.
But what inspired you to write it? I mean,
It was scary. It was scary to be in America, number one, being a visible minority, and also it was something that I hope never happens again. You know, it happens in a rock club, which is a place that we consider home. We played in Paris there like the year before, like down the street from that club. Our booking agent in Europe had several friends there, so it was a very jarring thing, and it was immediately very.
I think a lot
Painful.
of people, I think a lot of people have these, you know, I think we live in a country where we're not subjected to a lot of things that other people face every day.
Yeah.
And then when something like that happens in a place that's very familiar to us because we go to music shows, you're a musician, I think maybe it gives you a different perspective that, oh my God, that could have been us.
Yes, and I think that's why it was so powerful. And I feel part of me feels really guilty because this kind of thing happens in so many different countries all the time. But for a place, you know, like in Paris, especially after like the Charlie Hebdo attacks as well, part of me felt guilty for that being the reason that I started really paying close attention. But that is how it happens sometimes. When it happens closer to home, you're forced to pay more attention. So by virtue of that, that's sort of the motivation for the song and why I kind of felt compelled to say something, because at the end of the day, if you aren't addressing this, it's not just going to go away, I think.
Do you think that music can affect political change?
I think that a lot of people put a lot of pressure on artists and musicians for having like an answer or something like that. Like people will look at guys like John Lennon as sort of like political speakers, and it's like, well, really, that's not the end of the conversation. That artists are the beginning of the conversation. They're the ones that should spark the initial inspiration to start looking into something more deeply. We're not experts. Like I play guitar and yell things into a microphone. Like I'm not in any way like a political scientist. Like I can only refract whatever I take in and communicate that to people. So I think that I don't know if we can inspire political change, but we can inspire people to start thinking more politically and thinking a little bit more closely about the things that are important to each individual artist.
I find too now in this the age of social media, I find sometimes that musicians, celebrities are kind of pushed to take a stand on certain things.
Yeah, big time.
Do you think you have a responsibility to do that?
No, I don't think that anybody should have a responsibility to just say. I think that's part of the problem is that people think that they need to comment on everything, and I don't think that that's the case at all. I think that people should comment on things that resonate with them, good, positive, or negative. But I think part of the problem is that it gets cluttered with people's opinions a lot, very easily on the internet with things like Twitter, which ultimately is, that's just the way people communicate these days. But I don't think that artists haven't. I think that in 2016, if you're not saying something about the world around you, especially as like a punk band or an indie rock band, then that's too bad, I think, because there's a lot of things going on in the world that do need our attention more than being hungover and partying and whatnot. But again, like to each their own. Like you don't have any responsibility. You're, again, too much pressure gets put on rock bands, I think, to communicate a message.
And also too, from the perspective of the person that you are, what you look like. Growing up, I grew up in London, Ontario. I liked Guns N' Roses and I liked Skid Row.
Yeah.
But then everyone had the assumption that, oh, you like hip hop, you like R&B.
Right.
When people find out, or when they see you fronting an indie rock band, what is that reaction like?
I think people are often like surprised that I'm the singer, which I get a lot, which is kind of funny.
What
to
do they
me.
expect you to be?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess a brown guy can't be a indie rock frontman, but I don't know. I grew up worshiping like Stephen Malkmus and people like that, so those are my idols growing up. So obviously, I want to kind of be like that as a teenager getting into music. But yeah, it's kind of funny when people are like, "Oh, you're the guy that writes the songs." It seems like an interesting. It's a weird thing to be surprised by in 2016.
It is. Again, it goes back to, I guess, the genre, having that need to put people in boxes.
Yeah. I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a kind of a whitewashed genre, but I think more and more you see a lot more people.
Jimi Hendrix, what?
Yeah, there you go. And I mean, rock and roll was
Yeah.
not invented by.
Yeah, it's like created by Black musicians.
Yeah, totally. But you do start to see a lot more people of all sorts of different backgrounds. You see a lot more, like, there's a lot of popular indie rock bands with really powerful female front women, people of color in all sorts of different bands. Like our label, Buzz Records, has so many different people from so many different backgrounds, people who identify so many different ways, which I think is starting to happen more and more all around the greater indie rock community, which I think is really wonderful.
Being in Toronto, I mean, we were just recently named the most diverse place in the world.
Yeah.
When you travel, especially the climate in the U.S. with the upcoming elections, how do fans respond to you? Have you ever had any negative experiences?
No, I've been pretty lucky. I've been pretty lucky with that kind of thing. If it's anything, it's very like subtle, kind of couched racism. But the thing is, like within the DIY, like punk rock, indie rock community, it's a lot of like-minded people.
DIY is do it yourself.
Yeah. I think it's extremely inclusive a lot of the time. Like there's obviously people who don't really understand how to navigate those things, and you know, there's mean people everywhere. But I think for the most part, we're really lucky that we're part of a greater circuit of bands and promoters and fans all around North America that are extremely inclusive and have never made me feel out of place or anything like that. So
We touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to talk more about your early introductions into music. What's
Sure.
your earliest memory?
of just getting into like rock music.
Yeah.
My earliest memory was one was watching Terminator 2 and seeing John Connor ride around on a dirt bike listening to Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
And then the other, my dad played me Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones once, and it's just like, you know, the Maxell guy who's just like,
Yeah.
blowing, but that was basically me as like a 3-year-old kid. So
And you were hooked.
that was it. Yeah, that was the end of it for me.
And those are some of your favorite bands then, or?
Yeah, oh yeah, to this day for sure. And then Nirvana, like Nevermind came out when I was 4 years old, so that was like pretty monumental
Oh
to
my
me.
gosh, you're a baby.
Sorry.
You were 4?
Yeah.
Wow. Was it challenging identifying with artists growing up?
No, to be honest, because I mean, like again, I grew up in Toronto, and my school was pretty multicultural. I was like the only brown boy in my grade. But no, nobody ever made me feel out of place for liking those things. It always felt very, because I mean, the artists that I liked, most of my heroes, I realized recently, happened to be white guys.
Yeah,
men
I
and
read
women.
that you said that you don't have any heroes that are of Indian descent.
Not a lot, really. I can't think of any.
Why do you
like,
think that is?
I think my dad's cool, but other than that,
Well, I'm sure he's happy to hear that.
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know. That's just how indie rock bands looked, I guess, for like a really long time. So it's really cool now to see so many different bands like Downtown Boys and Speedy Ortiz and all these, and bands from Toronto like Weaves and Dilly Dally with people who don't look like straight white guys fronting really powerful and amazing bands. Like it really does mean a lot to me as an older person, kind of navigating that a little bit.
As an older person.
Yeah, slightly older.
How did Grace get started?
Grace started, our guitar player Cam and I, we went to high school together. And we just, at the time, it was like the late 2000s, 2010, 2011, and we were kind of kicking around the idea of starting a band that sounded like the noisy punk bands that we liked, like
Who?
Like Hot Snakes and Drive Like Jehu, Fugazi, and Failure, and all these different bands like that, Jesus Lizard. And we weren't really hearing that in Toronto because at the time it was like a very, very like indie rock city. This is like post-Broken Social Scene, who still have like a monumental impact on bands from here. So a lot of the bands that were around at the time were pretty like poppy indie rock bands, which is fine, but that just kind of wasn't really what we were feeling at the time. And so we just decided to start this band that was like extremely noisy and angular because that's what we wanted to hear. And
And what is the noise? Like, why noise?
I think there's a level of dissatisfaction that is quelled with extremely loud guitars for certain people. Like there's something very calming about just hearing and feeling these intense vibrations from the amplifier come at you. And it was somewhat therapeutic, I guess. Like it satisfied a lot of things for me. It feels like you're like a member of the X-Men or something like that, and you have like a superpower when you can just make this extremely loud noise, and everybody in the room has to pay attention to you because you're louder than them. And that was kind of the initial goal, was just to be as noisy as possible.
Tell me about your first show. How did it go?
It was good.
Yeah.
Actually.
Were you nervous?
Kind of.
Yeah.
We had all played in bands before, so it felt pretty natural. I look at our first shows when our drummer Braden joined the band, and he immediately just clicked with everybody. And he was so relaxed that he was wearing sweatpants on stage, and it was fun. It went over really, really well. And Toronto's always been really supportive of us. Like one of the first shows we ever played was in a garage in Chinatown. That would later kind of become the hub for our community of bands on Buzz Records and other bands too, who to this day like are some of my best friends. And it was a really good start for the band to be immediately just be part of this really diverse and colorful community of cartoon characters. It was really
Superheroes.
Cool. Yeah, superheroes. Yeah, it kind of was like that. Like you look at like Marvel comics and stuff like that. Like that's what the community of bands is like in Toronto to me, and I really love that.
And what do your parents think of your music?
Of the music that we make?
Yes.
I think my dad and my mom always kind of say like, I wish you wouldn't yell so much. My mom, I remember saying.
You're like, that's the point.
Yeah, I remember my mom saying like, I think people would like it more if you didn't yell as much. I was like, okay. She's not wrong.
You were talking about Buzz Records.
Yeah.
Is it a conscious decision to be with a independent, or would you guys sign with a major, or is that something that you're not thinking about?
I think that in this day and age, like a band like ours, like an indie rock band signing to a big major label is pretty antiquated. Like I don't think that a lot of that doesn't happen very often. Like rock music, like guitar-based rock music is so out of favor, I think.
Yeah.
Like people, that's just not what like sells records. So I can't imagine a big major label picking up a band like us regardless. But even still, I don't think that would ever really make sense for us. Like I love being on Buzz because I mean these guys are some of my closest friends that run the label. And it represents something for me that I always wanted. Like it represents a community. It represents a sense of identity within that community. We have a voice that kind of, all of us gravitated towards the label for a reason. You know, like I think everybody on the label has a similar mindset in that we kind of want to mix that dissonance with the melody because we all like pop music just as much as we like intense noise rock.
This is the thing, because I think a lot of people think that because you make the music that you make, then you don't like certain music, and you just brought up pop. Do you like pop music? You just said you
I
liked
love pop music. I mean, I grew up listening to all sorts of stuff. I got into rock music a little bit later because my brother loved hip hop music so much. So I grew up listening to like Tribe Called Quest and Boot Camp and all those kinds of things. But
well, do you think that now rock music has kind of become a niche?
Yes and no. I mean, if you look at festival lineups, there's always going to be rock bands. Like people always want to lose their minds to rock music. I think it's always going to be there. But I think, yeah, maybe it is a bit more of a niche because...
do you feel any pressure to popify your music?
No.
Make it more accessible, I guess? Which is so silly because it's music. If it speaks to you, correct?
I mean, we like melody, but I've never felt any pressure. I think maybe if we had like this sudden like groundswell of interest, there would be more pressure to perform a certain way. But no, we kind of do the opposite. If somebody wants us to do something, we'll just do the opposite thing.
And you probably stand out even more, right?
Maybe.
I want to show you a clip. This is from a program that we did last spring on the state of pop music. And Alan Cross from 102 The Edge is talking about authenticity in popular music today.
Okay.
I wonder where the idea of authenticity is floating in popular culture right now. Is it important? I mean, back when we had grunge in the 90s, it was all about authenticity. I mean, when you got up on stage, there was no set, you were in your street clothes, and you just played music as it came out of your heart. Now we're living in a very, very pop world right now. I mean, you look at the top 10 or top 40, and it's all pop songs.
What do you think about what he just said?
I kind of go back and forth on this. Like, I think that's true. It is all pop songs, but pop is kind of relative. Like, he's referencing the 90s and the grunge bands, but that was pop music back then. Like, Nirvana was a really, really popular band, and Pearl Jam.
Because they were popular.
They were popular. They were pop music. Like,
Yeah.
when you start to influence the way people dress, then you're a part of like culture, and you're a popular artist at that point. Like Pearl Jam and Nirvana were extremely popular at that time. That's why those bands sold a lot of records. I don't think that it's altogether abnormal that pop bands are in the top 10 or whatever in the Billboard charts. Like, I think that that's actually quite normal. Like, a lot of pop music was extremely lucrative in the 80s and every other decade as well. I don't think it's abnormal or anything like that, but I think the pendulum just kind of swings back and forth
Because
every
I
now
think
and then.
all music becomes popular at some point.
I think
and then
so.
it becomes pop music. Because I think right now you can hear a lot of rap music on the radio,
Yeah.
and you could say that's pop music.
Totally is. I consider a lot of, like, I mean, Drake to me is not like a hard hip hop artist. He's like a pop guy. He's one of the most famous people in the world. So, I mean, I agree in the sense that I do think that, yeah, a lot of pop music is on the Billboard charts right now, but I don't necessarily think that that's like good or bad. I just think that that's how it is right now.
So I wonder, why is there a pushback to become popular? Because do you get into music to make music for yourselves, or do you get into music to have a career, make, tour, make money? So is being popular a bad thing?
I mean, we don't shy away from having like a bigger audience or anything like that, but that shouldn't inform your creative decisions at all. Like it's weird for a band like us because we're pretty abrasive, but I would never think that.
Abrasive in sound or message?
Both.
Yeah.
I think that we can be pretty caustic in how we communicate that message musically and lyrically, but I don't think that we, or really most of our friends in bands, start bands with any notion of like, it's some other notion of glory than like financial, I think. Like for me, it was always enough to just be able to tour and play to an audience of people who paid attention to me. And if that audience grows, then that's great, but I'm not gonna stop doing it because it dwindles. Like, I think every band has like an arc. And if you stop after it starts to go down, then that's too bad, because you can continue making great art regardless of how many people are listening to you. So it's absolutely not in any way a motivational thing for us to do better or whatever.
Now, going back to when you were 3 and you became a fan of rock music, looking back and looking at yourself now, do you like have an out-of-body experience? Like, oh my gosh, I'm actually making this music now.
Oh man, if I was 3 years old and I saw myself now, it's like, oh, you get to eat pizza and hang out with your friends all day? No problem. That's great. I think 3-year-old me would be pretty excited.
Is that what you do? Can I sign up?
Oh, sure, yeah, that's essentially my whole life. But I mean, like, I also, like, 3-year-old me would have set the bar pretty low. I'm flying over it. It's great.
Well, congratulations on your success,
Hey,
and thank you
thanks
for being on the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.